Welcome to The Poetry Joint, a podcast about poets, poems, and poetics. My name, Stephen Donahue. I have a scant knowledge of poetry, and that is the starting point for this podcast, to see what I can learn.
There's a light on in the attic. I can see it from the outside, and I know you're on the inside, looking out.
Exploring good poetry, bad poetry, sonnets, couplets, ballads, rhyme, no rhyme, grand verse, silly verse, concrete poetry, liquid poetry, words with meaning, words without meaning, old poets, young poets, radical poets, ancient poets, contemporary poets, confessional poets.
Angel-headed hipsters, burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo in the machinery of night.
The Poetry Joint. Hang out. See where we go. The following poem was contributed to the website Poetry X Hunger, which hopes to marry poetry to the issue of solving world hunger. And this poem was also used in a public service announcement for the Feed the Children charity organization.
This is Josephine. This is my poem. It is called Enough. Would words be enough, I would sate your hunger. I would build for you a well ever filled with water clean. I would work alongside as you till the field, watch hope emerge green from brown earth. Would words be enough, I would end your misery, watch each child of yours grow strong and true, teach you to read and to write and to sing, so that your voice be forgotten nevermore. Would words be enough, I would help you bear your burden, bring healing to your wounds and strife. See beyond the lines on a map, beyond color, and you would know you are my sister, my brother, if words were enough.
This episode will feature a conversation with Cali poet, writer, and photographer Josephine Lowray. She has had a Calgary Herald bestseller with her 2019 book of photographs and poetry, titled The Cowichan Series. She is a member of the League of Canadian Poets, Haiku Canada, the Writers Guild of Alberta, the Alexandra Writers Centre Society, Parkland Poets, the Stroll of Poets, and more. She has a website that provides further information about her publications, her biography, and much, much more. On to our conversation. Why poetry?
I think poetry is essential because it relays, it communicates, but it isn't factual per se. It's words that usually appeal to the heart or to the soul, if one can talk about people having a soul. In a way, poetry is like abstract art, where you're not looking at a photographic depiction of reality, but you're looking at someone's version of it, someone's perception of it. I feel that really, really good poetry that hits the mark, is at once deeply personal and universal, so that there's an echo within the person listening or reading to their own experience in their own life. If you look at, historically, poetry was a form way before prose was. So if you look at Homer, the Iliad, the Odyssey, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, Dante Alighieri's La Divina Commedia, those were all written in poetic form. And the rhyme and the meter, those were elements that helped people memorize them so they could be repeated and passed down from generation to generation. So there is also that musicality in poetry, which some people find really appealing. Let's start with that.
I see on your bio you indicate that you got an early start on poetry, that
Yes.
You were first published when you were 12 years old.
That's very true. It was affiliated with our junior high school. the library was quite close, and I'm sure it must have been the teachers who recommended that we write and submit pieces. And I had an experience before that when I was in grade 4. The teacher had asked us in the autumn to write a story about the trees, and what I wrote wasn't poetry per se, but it was the tree being very sad because the leaves were falling and dying. And she was very surprised at that kind of sensibility that I brought to the piece, that it wasn't purely descriptive, but it was on the emotional side. And I remember her remarking that about me, that I was sensitive to what was happening in nature and sympathetic to it in a way that involved not just the visual senses or the perceptive senses, but also the sense of feeling.
Mm-hmm. I see you mentioned that even through till today, nature is a part of your poetry.
Yes, I feel very inspired by nature, and I taught social studies, and in the grade 7 curriculum, we talk about the Indigenous peoples and their relationship with nature and with the land, and how they feel that everything has a spirit, not just living beings or sentient beings, but even the rocks, the wind, like all the elements of nature have a spirit. And how, as opposed to the Judeo-Christian tradition of this man's superiority over nature, which was like given to them, like people were given reign over the rest of the earth. I really like the Indigenous feeling that there is no echelon of superiority, and that we're part of nature. So I find, like, even here in California, when I tune into what's happening around me, it's poetry, and all I have to do really is observe it in my quietness and then write it. So I can give you an example. This is a surfing town. So there's people in their wetsuits, and they're paddling out on their surfboards. And while they're waiting for that wave to come in, there's a line of pelicans, maybe 4 or 5. They're the brown pelicans with this great big, like, prehistoric beak. And they're planing right over that line where the froth, like the waves crest, and there's that froth. And one of them goes the other direction. So if they're all traveling northbound, one of them is going south. And as he goes, he or she, he tilts his body so that the tip of the wing is dipping into that spray. And I just think, what a beautiful moment that is. It's almost like, for me, it's almost sacramental. Just sit in nature. The beauty is abounding.
And I suppose the hard part is transferring that to words that you can convey to other people, certainly.
It isn't hard. I think the hard part is finding the stillness we're in to write. So I'll often photograph, or I'll write down snippets, and then the poetry seems to flow almost naturally from it. Yeah. Or sometimes it takes a day or two. Like, I've been watching the little sandpipers. There's always 3 of them at least. And then the avocets are alone. And the gulls, there's usually a mass of them, right? And so what do I want to say about that? Like, what does that say to me, and how can I convey that through poetry? It's funny because when I read poetry, a collection of poetry, I often open at random and I think, okay, what does this collection say to me in this moment? So it's not what the poet intended. The poet, I'm sure, was very intentional in the sequence, and there's a story, there's an arc, much as there would be a story in our narrative arc in a novel. But I often open to get inspiration from the one piece. But when I put together a collection, it's very important to me that it says something, and that even if there's dark pieces in there, pieces that reflect upon dark periods of life, I do want to always bring it back on the upswing. So right now I'm thinking about the acknowledgement and the dedication. My last collection I put together upon my father's passing. I want this one to be dedicated to my mom. The title is The Moon and All Her Faces. And it's kind of, I don't really mean face, well, I do mean faces, but I also mean phases. And I want it to be on my mom because right now she's living with dementia. And she's very much living in the moment. So if things can be orchestrated so that she's happy and feeling loved, she's in this Zen moment of happiness. And I want to reflect that through the poetry, that you can get through the hard periods in life. And it's up to us really to see and to cultivate the beauty, and to choose to live in the light, no matter how dark things become for us.
A little background for the upcoming part of our conversation. The Pushcart Prize, Best of the Small Presses series, has been published every year since 1976 and is one of the most honored literary projects in America, including receiving highest honors from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Since 1976, hundreds of presses, small presses, and thousands of writers of short stories, poetry, and essays have been represented in the annual collections. Visit their website for more information on how this homage to small presses survives in this world of commercial megaliths.
Someone said once or announced through Facebook that they had been nominated for the Pushcart, and I had no idea what it was, but I thought, I love that. I want to be nominated for that. I have no idea what it is. The Pushcart Prize Committee chooses the ones to publish in a yearly anthology. So it isn't a monetary prize. It's more, for me, I see it as a recognition and prestige. And someone asked me, like, when do you find out? And I thought, find out what? Like, I have no pretensions that I'm going to win the Pushcart Prize, but being nominated is already a huge acknowledgement of my work, validation of my work. Yeah.
Do you have poets you like to go back and read?
I do. So in high school, our grade, I think 11, 12, I went to school in Ontario, so we even had 13, but my English teacher, in the poetry unit, she brought Elton John in as a model poet. So we did Candle in the Wind. So that was one of my first meetings of poetry that was really, really accessible. I have to say, I love the poetry of Robert Frost. In terms of poets who are more contemporary, I oftentimes I find poets with whom there is a shared affinity and sensibilities, and we often work together and we bring poets to the table. So I have to say that I was very struck by the poetry of Li-Young Lee, who lives in the States, and Eavan Boland, who recently, within the last few years, has passed away, and she's Irish. So I did prepare those poems. If you want, I could open them up on my computer. So this is Li-Young Lee, and the poem is called Have You Prayed? And he prefaces this poem by saying that when he was a child and he would come down after waking up, his father would ask him, have you prayed today? And he would always say yes, even though he hadn't. And so this is him as a man reflecting back because his father has now passed away. Have you prayed? When the wind turns and asks in my father's voice, have you prayed? I know 3 things. 1, I'm never finished answering to the dead. 2, a man is 4 winds and 3 fires, and the 4 winds are his father's voice, his mother's voice, or maybe he's 7 winds and 10 fires, and the fires are seeing, hearing, touching, dreaming, thinking, or is he the breath of God? When the wind turns traveler and asks in my father's voice, have you prayed? I remember 3 things. 1, a father's love is milk and sugar, 2/3 worry, 2/3 grief, and what's left over is trimmed and leavened to make the bread the dead and the living share. And patience, that's to endure the terrible leavening and kneading. And wisdom, that's my father's face in sleep. When the wind asks, have you prayed? I know it is only me reminding myself a flower is one station between earth's wish and earth's rapture. And blood was fire, salt, and breath. Long before it quickened any wand or branch, any limb that woke speaking. It's just me, in the gowns of the wind, or my father through me, asking, have you found your refuge yet? Asking, are you happy? Strange, a troubled father, a happy son, the wind with a voice, and me talking to no one.
Great.
Isn't that amazing?
I love that one. Yeah. Great.
Yeah, so that's
Thank-
very inspirational to me, that kind of he's having a dialogue with himself as he's considering life in its enormity. And again, I mean, I did say it earlier, but there's a universality in this poem, and there's also a very personal aspect to it.
Yeah.
Should I share the other one by Eavan Boland?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm enjoying this.
Okay, good. Thank you, Stephen. So Eavan Boland from Ireland. It's called Quarantine. And both of these are available to read online through, one of them is through Poem a Day, and one of them is through, in the United States, the Poetry Foundation.
Yep.
So if people are interested, they can download, I would say the app, but it isn't really an app. You get sent a poem a day to your mailbox, or you can go to the website and read a poem a day. So Quarantine, it's called, by Eavan Boland, who passed away in 2020. In the worst hour of the worst season of the worst year of a whole people, a man set out from the workhouse with his wife. He was walking. They were both walking north. She was sick with famine fever and could not keep up. He lifted her and put her on his back. He walked like that, west and north, until at nightfall, under freezing stars, they arrived. In the morning, they were both found dead, of cold, of hunger, of the toxins of a whole history. But her feet were held against his breastbone. The last heat of his flesh was his last gift to her. Let no love poem ever come to this threshold. There is no place here for the inexact. Praise of the easy graces and sensuality of the body. There is only time for this merciless inventory. Their death together in the winter of 1847. Also what they suffered, how they lived, and what there is between a man and woman, in which darkness it can best be proved.
A little further background, Young Lee was born in Jakarta, Indonesia, to Chinese parents. His father had been a personal physician to Chairman Mao. Political challenges led the family to Indonesia, Hong Kong, Macau, Japan, and finally to the United States. Lee started writing while attending university in the United States, and he has won 3 pushcart prizes amongst many other awards. Eavan Boland, a noted poet, writer, and teacher, was born in Dublin, Ireland, and grew up in London and New York. Her father was a diplomat, and her mother, Frances Kelly, was a well-known expressionist painter. Links with further information to Boland, Lee, and Josephine Lowray will be on the Poetry Joint Facebook page. How do you apply your talent to inspiring others?
That's a very big question for me. So when I was teaching, I incorporated poetry into my teaching, and I wanted to keep it simple. So for my grade 7s in French language arts, it was haiku booklets, and there were 4 pages, one for each season, and I wanted them to illustrate it. Other things I've done with students is collage poems. So they find snippets and they put it together. There was one year where I aligned it with Earth Day, and I said to them, we need to write a prayer to protect the planets and to integrate imagery. At one point, one school that I was in had a poetry festival, and we had the students who were brave enough to come up on stage and present to the entire assembly. Now that I've retired, I have served as poet in residence in schools, and I love it. It's wonderful. I share a lot of my poetry in as many live and online venues as I can. I've been mentoring poets, up and coming poets, sometimes just casually. And actually I was given the wonderful opportunity to mentor somebody through the Writers Union of Canada. So they applied to have me as their mentor, and it was accepted, which was incredible. Yeah. But those are the ways in which I feel like I'm helping poetry get out into the world.
Yes.
Yeah. And sometimes there's praise that comes in the most unexpected of ways. After a reading, when I go and speak to the people who are in the audience and they give me my lines back, they recite my lines back and said, oh, this line, and it's like, oh, like, that's amazing. And I shared some poetry last weekend with some friends, and some of them are developing poets. And one of the comments I heard was, my wife wishes she had written that poem. And I thought, wow.
Words of encouragement to anybody that wants to write poetry, maybe doesn't want to publish poetry, or say a young student starting out decides that would be a wonderful way to express themselves. What do they do? Do they just go for it, or
I would say have no fear, and don't feel intimidated by the entire work of poetry that already exists. Find a way, and this was very good advice given me by Kirk Miles, who is the director of The Single Onion, which is Calgary's longest standing poetry reading series. He told me to find my voice. And that's hard, because in the beginning you will copy, you will emulate, you will model other voices. But find your voice, expose yourself to as much poetry as you can. So read poetry, listen to poetry, go to readings. And something I find more and more helpful in my life is find other poets who share the same sensibilities and aesthetics as you do and work with them. Like the first time I read poetry was at the Single Onion event. It was called Midnight Yoga for Alcoholics, something like this. It was a very strange thing. And a woman had gone up to the open mic, and it was her first time at the microphone. And I don't know what was shaking more, if it was the sheet of paper in her hands or her voice. And she shared a very intimate poem and exposed a lot of very raw feelings. And I remember thinking, I want to do that, because I had written when I was younger, and I won the Norma Epstein Poetry Prize in university. I'd stopped writing when I had 3 babies in 4 years, and then went back to work full time. And but I wanted that. I wanted to be able to read my poetry to a room full of people attentive, with very thirsty ears. And I think reading your poetry allows the lines that you've written on the page to take wing, and the breath, like when you speak your poetry, you breathe your anime into it, and it goes out into the world.
How do you find poetry comes to you?
For me, it isn't a practice where I tell myself, okay, I'm going to sit at my desk and write poetry now. It's like, it does come to me as a gift. And I think the biggest part of it is being open to what's happening in the world around me, and then trying to find the right image or metaphor to convey that, and to look for layers of meaning. So for instance, in COVID, it was near the end of the first COVID winter, and we were all in isolation. And I was walking in my neighborhood, and there was a tree that was bare branched, of course, no leaves in the canopy. And there were 3 crows. And I looked at the crows, and I think, crows are the corvid family, which is very close to COVID. And oftentimes people associate crows as messengers of death. And a gathering of crows is a murder. And so this little snippet came to me, and if I don't have paper and a booklet on me, because I often have a booklet with me, I just speak into my phone, and I created a haiku on the spot. So 3 crows in a tree, not quite a murder, a conspiracy. Yeah, and last summer I traveled. I was 3 weeks in Portugal for my very first time in Portugal. I wrote, like it took tons of photographs, but I also wrote my feelings, observations, reflections. And now I'm starting to render that into poetry. Like the poetry didn't necessarily come on the spot. So one example of a poem that I think it's finished, but you never really know for sure. So I was in an abandoned and deconsecrated monastery. The reason they abandoned the monastery was that it was so close to the river that when the river overflowed its banks, it would be flooded. And so the flood lines on the stone were about hip high to me. And you could see there were green and black marks. And it was the monastery of St. Clair. And I learned a lot about St. Clair, which I didn't, like, I'd heard of the Poor Clares, but I didn't know a lot about them. And I ended up having this moment, and some people could say like it's fanciful or it's nonsense perhaps, but I had this image of the nuns swimming up to the altar to receive communion. So I wrote a piece, like it's almost like a Chagall poem about, and I called it The Floating Clares. Those images I've observed last year, but it's been sitting and kind of bubbling, and yeah, I think the poem is ready. I keep a notebook. I have many journals on the go. I keep one, and it's called Stolen Fragments. So if I'm in a reading and somebody says something stellar, I write it down and I write their name, and that way I can write a poem and attribute it to them. Because sometimes somebody will say something and it's just brilliant. I was inspired once by a few lines of Leonard Cohen, and it became my poem, but they were inspired by him. So it's really important if you hear something that speaks to you, or if you have you are exposed to an image that's quite moving or beautiful, like Li Young Lee in The Wind, hearing his father's voice asking if he's prayed. So I do have a whole notebook called Stolen Fragments. Novelists borrow and poets steal. Can I read one of mine?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to read you the poem that I wrote in New Mexico then. I went to New Mexico last year with my dog. We drove down. One night in New Mexico, 2 a.m., words converge, settle like a cloak of cloud on the early morning rim of these mountains. Sandia, Manzano, Sangre de Cristo, they wear their history like the passing of the sun. A child's DNA lives on in the cells of the mother's brain, indelible. So too must it be for the shrouds of our dead, trailing heavy behind, cloak, dragging in sand, leaving an imprint as indelible and ephemeral as the passage of a desert snake. We cocoon in this space under a cloak of stars, muzzle to nose, and I realize how quickly your blood beats through your body as we sleep, muzzle to nose. Did we start off with the same number of beats, our lives? Do you run through yours more quickly, muzzle to nose? Although you see solely in black and white, do we dream the same dreams?
Cool. Thanks very much, Josephine.
Oh, you're very welcome. I literally woke up at 2 a.m. and scrambled for paper and pen because my dog and I were sleeping in the back of the vehicle that night instead of getting a hotel room. Thank you to Josephine Lowray for providing some insight into her art and to the larger art of poetry. Here is one of the pushcart poems published in 2023. The author, Ken Kraft. The title, The Pause Between. Only May, but the wasps and yellow jackets are anxious as October afternoons, as their hum and buzz bend toward the sweet rot of last year's garden. Inside, the ants scribe picaresques along the painted cracks of old floorboards. Everything is leg life and antennae riddle. Everything is secret restlessness and hidden destination. One day the dragonflies appear sudden as the sun. Speed and softness, they lash sky to air in silent seams. One's barbed wings and abdomen are pressing to the warm dock slats. Another lights on the Chekhov book you bought me, not realizing, like everything, it is a short story too. Two fishermen sit in a boat across the lake, hunched, specks, tired voices carrying over the water, reminding me of winter mornings, scrambled eggs in the iron skillet, you coming up the hall in my flannel shirt. There's a north wind off the back of the island and a noisy kingfisher on a dead branch, each fashioning cold presents out of your absence. A pine needle falls on my thigh. A loon looks across the water, garnet-eyed and open-beaked. You said after a loon calls, it always waits for its mate to call back. You said the pause between is the loveliest, loneliest hollow in the world. The Poetry Joint pauses for a month's time.
back then with more poems, poets, and poetics. For those listening to an online version of the Poetry Joint, this is a bonus poem recently discovered in a copy of Robert Frost's second collection, North of Boston, was a poem he had written down by hand. The poem titled Nothing New. One moment when the dust today against my face was turned to spray, I dreamed the winter dream again. I dreamed when I was young at play. Yet strangely, not more sad than then. Nothing new, though I am further upon my way. The same dreams again. Robert Frost, Amherst, 1918.